So now that I've narrowed in on my composition, I want to remove any distracting elements in the files. And I really want to show you two different ways that you can edit based on whether or not you're working on a smart object that's pixel-based or a smart object that originated as a raw file. So I'm going to hide my properties panel here so we can see more of my layers. And in fact, I'm actually going to make these a little bit smaller because of the resolution that I'm recording at. So I'll go to Panel Options, and I'm just going to decrease the thumbnail size so we can see a few more of our layers at one time. Now, I find that this area right here on the metal layer is actually quite distracting. It's just a little bit too obvious. But if I select, for example, my healing brush or maybe the patch tool, and then click on the metal layer, you'll notice that Photoshop gives me the international symbol for it can't actually edit this layer. And that's because it's a smart object and I'm trying to do pixel-based editing. Now, certainly I could add a new layer, just a new blank layer, and I could start using either the patch tool or the healing brush on that new layer. Let me show you what I mean. I'll click on New Layer. Then we'll see under the options that I can choose to sample from the current layer and below, or all layers. So in this case, I might have chosen current and below and then removed this distracting element. The problem is then I have to remember that if I want to do something like make a change to the scale or size of the smart object, I would also have to change this layer. So I personally find it easier to keep track of if I actually edit the contents of the smart object. So let's delete this layer and then double click on the thumbnail for the smart object. That's going to open the smart object up in its own window, and now I can make my changes. Of course, I could make the changes directly to the background layer, but if I want to do this in a more flexible, non-destructive manner, I'll go ahead and make my new layer here. Now let's zoom in a bit, and remember, we have to keep track of the fact that in the composite file, this layer has been inverted. So what appeared dark in the composite is going to appear light here. So this is the area right here that I want to modify. I'll use the right bracket key just to get a little bit bigger of a brush, and then hold down the Option or the Alt key to select the point from which I want to heal from, let go of the Option or the Alt key, and then remove that area. And we can see if I toggle the eye icon on and off, this is a non-destructive edit. So if I did want to come back and remove it, I could at a later time because I created the edit on its own layer by choosing to sample from the current and below. Let's go ahead and save this. Once I save it and then close it, it will be updated in the perception image. And if I want to toggle the before and after, we can use Command Z to undo and redo. You can see how I just removed that distracting element. Now, I just want to explain that there's a big difference between editing the contents of a smart object when that smart object started off as a pixel-based file. So if you remember, when we opened up the metal document initially in Bridge, that was a JPEG file. We opened it up and then we moved that file into the composite document. Then we converted it to a smart object. So it did not originate as a raw file. On the other hand, this water image did originate as a raw file. When we opened it as a raw file, it came in through Camera Raw as a smart object. But when we double click on it, we're editing the contents of that raw file. So even though I can't do pixel-based editing here, I certainly could go in and select my spot removal tool, and I could come in and I could remove spots like these buoys in the image. Let's just reposition that there and get it a little closer. And this one as well. So I actually have the advantage here of editing the raw files with my global and local selections as opposed to editing the pixels, which is what I would have to do with that JPEG file. All right, I'll click OK. And if those are visible, they would then be updated. Now that we've learned how to remove distracting elements from different types of smart objects, let's move on to adding the elements that we want.